Be honest with me right now. How many alocasias have you killed? I'm willing to bet that you've killed at least one alocasia in your entire planting journey. And I know because I've been there, and trust me friends, you're not alone. So many people love and hate alocasias, and the reason is because they are so misunderstood. But fear not, my friends, that is going to change today, because in today's video, I'm going to tell you everything I've learned about caring for alocasia in semi-hydro, taking them from little corms to a beautiful full mama plant. Hello my beautiful planty friends, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here and we don't know each other yet, welcome. I'm Pita, and I'm the owner of Pita's Planters, a rare plant shop located in Dallas, Texas, and I'm also in the process of getting my PhD in neuroscience. And I started this YouTube channel to share everything I've learned from caring for hundreds of plants in my shop with a little bit of science background. So hopefully you'll stick around, subscribe, and I hope you find this video helpful. One of the things that truly made me fall completely in love with alocasias is the fact that they create corms. And if you're completely new to the world of alocasia, corms are essentially underground organs packed with nutrients. And so what the plant does, and this is such a cool evolutionary concept. So from a scientific perspective, I find this idea of creating corms so fascinating. So sometimes when the plant is growing out in nature, there are a lot of different factors that could affect the well-being of the plant. So there could be hurricanes, there could be pests, there could be things that completely wipe this plant out. And so the plant creates underground corms as an insurance policy. And so it basically is starting to create little babies. In case something happens to the mother plant, the babies are going to stay underground, protected from anything that is going on above ground. So if the main plant is wiped out, those little corms are eventually going to pop out when it's safe again, and that plant will continue on and on and on. Isn't that so fascinating? One question you may have is whether all alocasia develop corms over time, and the answer is that it varies. Not all alocasia develop corms at the same rate. Some can take a really long time, and you have to wait until they're very mature before they can produce any corms. Others corm even before they're fully mature. I've seen some alocasia, especially like the black velvet or the ninja tricolor, develop corms even when the plant is still a bit smaller. So over time, you'll kind of get a sense of which alocasias tend to develop corms a lot faster. But overall, I would say the healthier your plant is, the more likely it is going to develop corms. If your plant has enough nutrients and is happy and thriving overall, then all that extra energy can then be pushed into creating new corms. And one thing you may be wondering is, how do I know when corms are ready for harvesting? That's a great question. So there are a lot of different situations which you can use to harvest corms. One is if your plant is getting really big, if you have an alocasia that's outgrowing its pot and it's time to repot, I would take advantage of that situation to dive and look for corms in the soil. More than likely, if that plant is growing like crazy, it's probably going to have some corms in there. The second time I would take advantage of is if a plant is not doing well. So for instance here, I'm not sure if this is a Sabrina, I forgot which plant this was, but a lot of the leaves died back, and I know that this soil is not ideal for it. So I would take advantage of this situation to then repot it into better soil, even transplant it into semi-hydro more than likely, and then check for corms to make sure that if the main plant dies back, I will have those corms as an insurance policy to still have that plant going. And lastly, I would say if you just see tiny little babies popping up, which you will, I have seen some alocasia grow corms like crazy, and I'll eventually see them kind of like popping out here. And most of the time, I'm not in a rush to harvest these corms, so I just kind of let them do their own thing. And what you'll notice is a lot of the times when the corm starts popping up here, as long as I leave it there, it's eventually going to develop its own roots and even sprout right next to the mother plant. So I would wait for that plant to be established a little bit more before I then repot it and take it away from the mother plant. So here I have some corms that I have harvested in the past and that I need to pot up. And as you can see, these look very different. So this one here I would consider a corm, but it's honestly a plant that died back. It was a giant alocasia, and it is a corm though. So there's a bottom part and a top part, and you'll notice this for all corms. The top part is the more pointy part. The rounder part is the bottom part. So this round part, you're gonna put it into the soil like this, and roots are going to grow out from this bottom part, and you'll notice that this part is then going to start growing the leaves. This right here is what most of the corms that you harvest are going to look like. This is an especially tiny one, but it fell off of the mother plant, so I might as well try and see if I can grow it. So as you can see here, there's a top pointy part. So this is the part where the leaves are going to sprout from, and this long part here is where it was attached to the mother plant. I like to call this kind of like the umbilical cord. And so the way that you would plant it in the soil is exactly like this. This pointy part pointing up, that's where the new growth is going to come from. And then eventually the roots are going to sprout from this bottom part. And if you're unsure, because sometimes it can be a little bit confusing, for instance, is in this other tiny little corm here, I am a bit unsure. I would say this is probably the top part. But anyway, if you're unsure and it's really hard to tell the difference, I would just plant it like this. If you plant it sideways, the plant itself is gonna figure it out on its own. I've even seen some corms being planted upside down, and roots are naturally going to grow downward, and the leaves are naturally going to sprout upward. So the plant will figure it out. But yeah, when in doubt, just plant it sideways like this. One other thing that I also wanted to address is whether you should peel your corms before planting them. So here with this one, you can kind of tell that there is a little layer, a brown layer covering the entire corm. I've heard some people say that when they peel the corm, they tend to root a lot faster. Now, I don't think this has been scientifically tested. It's more of anecdotal evidence. So it's kind of like people try it and they think it might like root faster. I don't know. This is an experiment I would like to do eventually. In my opinion though, and based on what I know about the role that this little layer plays in plant development, it is designed to protect this little corm from the environment. So this little layer exists in nature to protect the corm from pathogens and to help it store more water. Now, because it is a protective layer, I would say it might not be the best to then remove that protective layer. So I don't know, I normally don't peel the layer and just let the corm do its thing, and most of the time it just sprouts. It sprouts and it roots well. So in my personal opinion, I wouldn't peel it and I would just plant it as is. Another important thing about corms is that in nature, they grow underneath the soil. They kind of just start developing and become bigger and bigger and eventually sprout. But before they even sprout, they're just underneath the soil. So unlike what a lot of people tend to think, they actually don't need any light at all. So when I root my corms, I leave them in a dark space. I don't provide them with light whatsoever until the corm sprouts. Once I start seeing some green leaves, that means that that little corm can now become a plant and it's officially starting to photosynthesize. And once a plant starts photosynthesizing, it will need some light. So I usually just let my corms root and do their own thing in complete darkness. Not complete darkness, but I just don't give it that prime space underneath grow lights. I only move them underneath the grow lights once I see an actual sprout. In my personal opinion, the most important thing to get your corms to sprout is a combination of warmth and humidity. I think those two things are way more important than light, again, until you get that corm to sprout. All right, so now that you've harvested your corms, what in the world do you do with them? So I'm gonna walk you step by step in what I would do to get these little babies to sprout. So first things first, let's talk about media. A lot of people like to sprout their corms in a lot of different ways. I've seen in water, I've seen in moss, specifically sphagnum moss, I've seen in perlite, in a lot of different things. But my personal favorite is a combination of Fluval stratum and perlite. And if you're not familiar with Fluval stratum, that is this right here. I'm sure by this point you are, because this has become so popular and the plant community is so creative, because who in the world was the first to think about using this as growing medium? This is typically used in fish tanks. It's the bottom layer that people add in fish tanks, and it's a really highly nutritious, I think, volcanic rock. I'm not entirely sure, but it's basically these little spherical pellets, and it is packed with a lot of great minerals. So what we have noticed as a whole in the plant community is that a combination, I like to do 50% fluval stratum and 50% perlite. The alocasias love rooting and growing in fluval stratum. So I would highly recommend, if you haven't tried it just yet, definitely give it a shot when it comes to rooting and sprouting your corms. Now that we've covered my favorite media to grow them in, I want to share with you the containers that I use to grow them. So first of all, I have two different ways that I like to grow them. One of them is in a humidity dome in these individual little clear containers. You can find these small ones literally anywhere on Amazon. I sometimes use a 2-inch clear cup, or most of the time I like to find smaller ones, about 1 inch to 1.5 inch. And I always make sure it is a clear pot because I really like to know exactly what's going on in the roots. It lets me know when that corm is finally well rooted before I decide to pot it into something else. And so if you go with this method, then I would highly recommend putting them inside of a humidity dome like this one here. So this is my favorite setup for growing my alocasia because I can fit a ton of corms in there. And it's really nice because once I notice that the corms have sprouted, I just put these trays straight underneath the grow lights so these guys can start getting enough light as they grow. The way that I like to do it is exactly like this. So I put my corms in individual cups and then I sit them next to each other just like that. You'll notice most of these guys don't have wicks underneath. I find that that's not even necessary when I'm growing them in a communal space like this one, because I like to water them directly in here. So I just add a little bit of water with my watering can. And then that water just kind of drains out. If I notice that there's too much water at the bottom, I'll go ahead and remove some of that excess water. But I like to leave a little bit of water puddles here and there to help increase the humidity here. But naturally, the humidity stays really high. It's about 100% humidity. So I don't really need to have a wick falling into a reservoir. So this method has worked really well for me. One thing to be careful of though is that once your corms sprout, I like to open this once in a while. So there's no actual airflow in there when the dome is on. So I open it about once every 2 days or so, which just happens naturally because I always want to see, like, is there new growth? Are there new roots? And so naturally, like, at least every 2 days, I'll come and open the dome and kind of see and look around at what's happening with the corms. So I like to open it pretty frequently just to increase the airflow in there, because if it's just closed the entire time and there's no airflow in there, it increases likelihood of things rotting or even stuff growing in there that you don't want growing in there. So here I have one corm that I kind of grew this way, and so you can see that little sprout. Look at that. I think there's another corm in there. Don't be like me, you guys. Please label your corms, or maybe be like me. Maybe you do like the surprise. Sometimes when I'm in such a rush, I don't label my corms and I'm like, oh, I'll totally remember where that corm was from. No, I don't remember, and a few weeks pass by and I'm like, what the heck is this? And so if you don't like surprises, then make sure to label your corms. So here's another one that I think I potted about 2 weeks ago. You can clearly see a nice little sprout there. And it's always fun to also see the root growth as well. So this is my setup, you guys. I really enjoy it, and like I said, it's really easy to then just put it underneath the grow lights once I see some sprouts, and these are all looking very, very happy right now. This method is also absolutely amazing for growing your corms individually. So the other method that I showed you, I grow them all together and it works fairly well. But if you don't have enough space for a huge humidity dome like that, it's nicer to grow them in these mini little humidity individual domes for each corm. And again, whoever came up with this in the plant community, props to you. This is so freaking cute. I forget who I first learned this from. Like, so many of the people in our community use these. Even some people like sell them and make them. It's honestly incredible. But these are basically just little dessert cups. So they can be a little tough to open sometimes. But basically, you would buy this little dessert cup like that. And again, everything is linked in my Amazon storefront. And then you buy this little shot glass that then sits inside of there. And then you put your Fluval stratum and perlite in there and close it like this. And I'm going to walk you step by step on how to make these little cups because it's super easy. So if you're growing like hundreds of corms at a time, it can get really expensive to buy them. So there is a really easy way for you to make them as well. So here's how you make those. So you're going to start by buying these 1.5 ounce shot glasses. You can easily buy them on Amazon in bulk and they're super cheap. Then you're going to want to invest in a soldering iron. And it looks scary at first, but it's actually super easy to use. And all you do is create a hole at the center of the cup, followed by a few other holes around it. The main one in the center is going to be to feed the wick through, and the other ones are for extra drainage. Since you are basically melting plastic, I highly recommend doing this in a well-ventilated area. Next, you are going to insert the wick through the center hole as shown here. I highly recommend also burning the ends to avoid the wick fraying like it has here. And then this is what the setup is going to look like. The very last step is going to be to fill up your cup with your 50% perlite, 50% Fluval stratum mix, and then insert your corm right side up. Then I water it a little bit, just enough to where there's enough water in the reservoir, and then close the lid. Alright, so once you have repotted your corm into one of these little containers, you'll have your Fluval stratum and perlite mix in there, a little bit of water at the bottom with a string dropping in there. Then you can go ahead and place this literally anywhere where it will be warm. So naturally, because the dome is closed, there will be enough humidity in there, but you want to make sure that there's also warmth. I like to place mine in some sort of tray, especially again, if you have a lot of corms that you're growing all at once. There's these trays. These trays here are designed, I believe, for shot glasses, and these fit these individually. This one isn't a perfect fit, so I'm not crazy about it. So what I did was I 3D designed and printed my own. So for instance here, I like this one a lot. This is one of the ones that I 3D printed myself, because that way when you sit it somewhere, the cup is not touching all the way at the bottom and it's just kind of sitting there. So it's also super easy to transport and you avoid the mistake of accidentally dropping it. I've had it to where I've had a bunch of these and I accidentally knock one over and that one knocks everything else over, and then my corm falls in there and it's really messy. So I highly recommend using some sort of tray. And I'm so happy I think I'm gonna put this file on my website eventually. I'm working on a few other designs. So here, if you want to hold like 4 at a time. I also think these are more flexible if you have a limited space. So instead of having to put like an entire tray, then you can just get a few of these and organize them exactly how you'd like. So I will have these for sale on my website eventually. But yeah, or you can like 3D print stuff at home too. This one was a really easy design. And as I mentioned previously, once that sprout is nice and established, so once the corm sprouts, you see really nice roots in there, then I would go ahead and transplant that little sprout into a bigger pot and put it in some sort of pond mix. The Fluval stratum and perlite mix is great to sprouts only, but over time that can be a little bit too fine, especially because both perlite and Fluval stratum can break down and become muddy. So you want to transplant it into pond and not leave it in that mix forever. So I wait for the roots to become nice and established, for the sprout to be nice and established as well. Then I transplant it into a 2 or 3 inch pot with pond. And then after that, I still continue to leave it in high humidity for a while, because that repotting can be shocking for the plants as well. That's the stage that these plants are in right now. So for instance here, I'm gonna open this up. These have been doing really well in here. So all of these guys have now been transplanted to pond and they're really nice and happy. You can see I have a lot of different ones in here. And honestly, these, I have seen really nice, strong fruit growth for most of them. So they're getting ready to be acclimated to room humidity levels, which ends up being about 50 to 60%. This beauty here, for instance, is so ready to be acclimated to room humidity levels. And I would still continue to grow it in a semi-hydro container like this. So this, you can see that, let me show you these roots because these roots are gorgeous. this is why I love growing in clear pots, because you cannot beat looking at those roots. It is so, so beautiful. And so this one here is doing incredible. And I would say, as I'm getting ready to put this one in room humidity, there are several things you're going to have to look out for. So first of all is make sure you're not letting the container dry out for long periods of time. I always make sure that there's at least a little bit of water at the bottom of the container. I honestly never really let my containers fully dry out, and I keep the water level pretty low. As long as the wick is in there in the water, it's okay. I never put it too high or let it dry out. It's always like a nice little in between. The other thing you're gonna have to look out for are pests. I'm so sorry, friends, but it's been used to growing in a nice semi-sterile environment in the little humidity dome. But naturally, when they go out from higher levels of humidity into lower levels of humidity, you may start seeing some spider mites. Spider mites thrive in lower humidity levels. They despise high humidity. So most of the time when you're growing these plants in a humidity dome, you won't really spot a lot of spider mites there. Once in a while you might, but more than likely you'll start seeing that when you take it out of that humidity dome. And this is a lot of the times what a lot of people miss when it comes to alocasias. I always tell customers, alocasias are magnets for spider mites. And the reason for that is because alocasias tend to have like thinner leaves, and spider mites are these tiny little like spider looking microscopic pests, and they have this long stylet that they insert into the cells of the plant. So if that plant is thinner, then naturally the stylet is going to be able to puncture through a little bit easier. And what they do is they find a nice delicious cell and they absorb all the organelles from that cell, including chloroplasts. And so you'll notice one sign that you have spider mites is usually a lot of white little dots, especially if you have a darker plant like this one. Look out for not only little webs, but also a bunch of like lighter dots. Those dots are showing where spider mites have gone and consumed all the chloroplast and all the good stuff from the cells of those plants. So that's one way to know. Now, make sure you're looking at the undersides of the leaves too. Spider mites love hiding underneath the leaves. They love creating webs in between the lobes of plants as well. And mature spider mites look red. So if you see any little like red bug just crawling around, more than likely that's a spider mite. The eggs and the younger spider mites look white. Another surefire way to know that you have spider mites is, especially if you have adult spider mites, if you take a white napkin and you wipe it on the leaf of your plant, and then you look at that napkin, and if you see streaks of red, those are squished adult spider mites. So these are one of the biggest ways that alocasias die, is because they are microscopic, so they're hard to see at first, and sometimes the infestation can get out of hand and they can take over a leaf and consume it before you even realize it. So make sure to be looking out for that. And one way to avoid getting spider mites is by making sure that you're always cleaning the leaves of your plant. So making contact, like I'll spray with my leaf cleaning spray and then actually taking a napkin and wiping every part of the leaf. The easiest way to remove spider mites is through actual contact and just squishing them out of the leaves. What I recommend for these spider mites, if you do already spot some, is insecticidal soap. Those are great for melting the exterior of the spider mites, and it's a bunch of salts mixed together that basically damages the body of the spider mites. If you have spider mites, avoid using systemic granules. Systemic granules do not work on spider mites, so you're gonna have to just be actively spraying down and cleaning those leaves with some insecticidal soap. Another thing is, if you do use insecticidal soap on the leaves, make sure to keep it away from direct sunlight while it dries and for a little while, because if you put a lot of insecticidal soap on the leaves and it's still wet and you put it under a grow light, that can cause some burning on the leaves. So just make sure to avoid that. All right, planty friends, those are all my favorite tips for growing corms in semi-hydro and taking them and converting them into the most beautiful beautiful, luscious alocasia plants. I hope you found this helpful, and I'm more than sure that I missed covering certain things that I forgot about, or maybe that I don't even know about yet. So if you have any special tips that you like to use, please share it with me and the rest of the people in the comment section. We're always here to learn. I'm always open to trying new ways of growing as well. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.